So in today's lesson, we're going to talk about simplifying and evaluating expressions with integers and zero exponents. So this is we've all seen exponents where we might have something like 2 to the second power or x to the fourth power. Well, now we're going to start throwing in some negative exponents and talking about what happens when we see a negative exponent. So when we talk about negative exponents, we have anytime we're going to see, you would see something like x to the negative first. Okay, so anytime we have a negative exponent, what we're going to do is we have to make those positive. So in order to make them positive, all we're going to do is invert them or flip them. So technically, x over negative the first would be, if we want to write as a fraction, would be x to the negative first over 1. So in order to make that x positive now, we would just flip it, and we would make it 1 over x to the first, or 1 over x. This is how we would do a negative exponent. If, let's say, I had 1 over x to the negative fourth, if we wanted to invert this, we would simply just flip this to the top, and we become x to the fourth. And so this is what would happen if we have negative exponents. Now, if we have anything to the 0 power, we've talked about this in the past, anything to the 0 power is 1, and it still stays the same way. So if we had x to the 0 power, it's 1. It's not x to the first, it's just 1. So any type of letter, any type of number, so 3 to the 0 power is 1. Y to the 0 power is 1. And so those are the two of the different rules we're going to talk about with exponents. So let's take a look at an example here. If we have x to the negative third, again, this is going to be over 1, so what we're going to do is invert it to make that number positive, or to make that exponent positive. So we would have 1 over x to the third would be our final answer. So if we also took another example here and looked at y to the negative fourth over x squared. Now the x squared is already positive, so we're going to leave it alone. We don't want to make it, if we move it to the top, it would make it negative, so we're going to leave it on the bottom. All we're going to do is move our y to the negative fourth to the bottom and make it positive. So we would have 1 over x squared y to the fourth, and this would be our new answer. Now let's look at another example, and this time we're actually going to substitute some numbers in. So if we had a squared b to the 0 power, but a is going to equal negative 2 and b is going to equal negative 3. So we're going to substitute those numbers in and then solve for the problem. So if we had a squared, so a was negative 2 squared, and b is negative 3 to the 0 power. Now we can work left to right here. Negative 2 squared is going to be 4 times negative 3 to the 0 power. Again, it's a negative number, but we're taking it to the 0 power, which makes it 1. So then 4 times 1 is going to be 4 for our final answer. If we took another example, and let's make it 3b to the negative third times b. So now we're going to input, for b, we'll put in negative 3 to the third power times negative 3. So I'll make my marks a little bit bigger here. Excuse me, this is to the negative third. So since this is to the negative third, we're going to have to take this, put this over 1, and we're going to invert it first. So we'll come over here, and we'll make this 3 times 1 over negative 3 to the third power. Remember that negative 3 is in parentheses, times our negative 3. So what we get when we do this, so we'll get 3 times 1 over negative 27 times negative 3. So then we get, if I erase some of this here, we would get 3 over negative 27 times negative 3. We'll put that over 1, which would give us negative 9 over negative 27. And when we reduce that, we would get a final answer of 1/3. Now something else we can look at is, we've talked about multiplying, but what happens if we have a division problem? So if I had like x over 4 over x over 2, what we can do is we subtract the numerator by the denominator, so it would be x to the 4 minus 2, which would give us x squared. So that's how you would get a quotient rule of exponents. Now, if this number is negative, then you would have to invert it and move it to the bottom. So let's take a look at an example. If we had x to the 7th over x to the 3rd, what we would do is take those two, subtract them, so we get x to the 7 minus 3, which would give us x to the 4th power for our final answer. Now let's take a look at a final example here. This is going to look a little daunting because it's like, wow, that's a lot of information right there. First thing we can do is probably just make everything positive. That's probably the best thing we can do. So we're going to move our x to the bottom to make it positive. We're going to move our z to the negative 3rd to the top to make it positive. And then we're going to combine like terms, and then if we have to subtract, we'll subtract. So we move the z to the negative 3rd to the top, which gives us now z to the 3rd, y to the 6th, z, over, and we move our x to the negative 5th to the bottom, gives us x to the 5th, y squared, x. Now we'll combine like terms, so when we're multiplying here, we have z to the 3rd and z would give us z to the 4th, y to the 6th, over our x to the 5th, and the x can combine to become x to the 6th, y squared. Now all we're going to do is see if we can subtract anything. We have all of our z's on the top, and we have our x's on the bottom, but our y's are two different y's. So we're going to subtract those two, and we would get z to the 4th, and we subtract 6 minus 2, we would get y to the 4th over x to the 6th as our final answer.